Well, recently we had a blizzard here in Kansas about 2 days ago. Pretty hard blizzard blew in and dropped about 12 inches of snow on us. And the winds blew pretty hard. And everybody was talking about it because we knew it was coming, and they were referring to it as the Blizzard of Oz or Snowpocalypse. But I thought it would be a great opportunity to test some equipment that I've got. And this started, actually the idea for this started back in December when I went deer hunting down in southeast Kansas. I used to live down there. It was about 90 miles from where I live now. So I went back down to the guy's property who I used to hunt on and decided, since I'm not living down there, I'm just going to stay in a tent. And I wasn't sure what to expect. I didn't have a good cold weather tent. I just have this tent, which is it's just a summer tent. I just bought it at Walmart for $30 or $40, and I've used it for camping in the summertime off and on over the years. It's all I had. It's open at the top. You can see these vents at the top are wide open, and then on top of that is just a kind of a canopy that keeps the rain from coming in. It does that for ventilation. And then along the bottom over here, I'll show you that it's got this zipper that closes up the kind of the mosquito netting or the bug netting, but then this outer flap that actually keeps the wind out, it doesn't even seal on the bottom. It zips down the center, but across the bottom it's just open and wind can blow through it. So wasn't exactly sure how well that was going to work. I went down to southeast Kansas, stayed the night, and it turns out I ended up with perfect weather. It got down in the high teens at night, got up to around 30 during the day. So it was just perfect weather, and I never did really get to test out the extreme cold weather functionality. All my other gear that I was wanting to test out in both of these excursions performed really well, and I'm going to talk about all that. I got several things I want to talk about, but the tent was the big X factor. I wasn't sure. I knew it was going to block some wind, but with these open areas, I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to stay warm when it gets down to sub-zero weather. And I'd known that when this blizzard blew in, it was supposed to get down below zero, even not counting the wind chill. So it was supposed to get down to -8 at one point, and the wind chill was supposed to be -20 to -30. So I thought, perfect opportunity to try this out on my property, just about 100 yards back from my house. So if it gets bad and I start really getting cold, there'd be no danger in the situation. I could just pack up and go home real quick. But when I was down there in southeast Kansas, 90 miles from home, and laying in the tent, it wasn't that bad, but I was wondering what would it have been like if it had turned really bad. Would I have been able to survive? Would I be actually in a dangerous situation? I just didn't know because I didn't have any experience with that. So, with the blizzard coming in, I decided I was going to try it out. The blizzard came in Tuesday. I was at work and had a hard time getting home, but Tuesday night I got home. I decided not to put the tent up ahead of time. I wanted to actually put the tent up in the blizzard and see how that worked out. First thing I learned wasn't any big surprise. I knew this was going to be the case, but putting up a tent in the middle of a blizzard at night with the snow blowing and wind blowing 30, 40, or 50 miles an hour is infinitely more difficult than putting it up on a nice warm summer evening. So one thing I learned from that is the gloves that I have are just some wool gloves. I actually don't have them with me right now. I was going to show that in the video, but they're just wool glove liners. They're really nice. They're not all that thick, but they keep your hands pretty warm. But the problem is they tend to collect snow, and when you're out working in the snow, like I had to scoop about a foot of snow away for the whole perimeter of the tent so I could set the tent on the ground. I was using a shovel, but I also use my hand a lot for that, so my wool gloves were pretty much caked in snow. And when I started trying to put the tent together, it's a pretty easy tent to put together, but with those gloves on, I really couldn't grip very well, so I ended up having to take the gloves off, and it was extremely cold. So I learned that I need to get some sort of a synthetic material glove, which won't keep your hands incredibly warm, but for short spans of time when you're having to work with things and you need more dexterity or gripping, it would be pretty good. So I need to get a pair of gloves just for that. I did get the tent put up. I staked it down. Normally I don't stake the tent down, but because the winds were blowing pretty hard, I staked it down on all four corners and every other place that had a staking point. And then once I got the tent set up, I just went ahead and went back inside. This was right around 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. It was pitch black, but the wind was blowing. I didn't want to spend hours out in the tent unnecessarily, so I went back inside and waited until about 10:30 and came back out here and just bundled up, got in my sleeping bag, and went right to sleep. And it got down to 2 degrees, and inside the tent, my thermometer wasn't working really well, so I'm not sure how accurate this is, but I think it got around, it stayed up around 12 degrees inside the tent. But I do know it got down to 2 degrees that first night outside, and I stayed perfectly warm. In fact, I was sort of sweating. The wind was blowing the tent really hard. It was shaking it around pretty good like this. But I never felt any of the wind on me, so it was keeping the wind off of me. One of the keys to all to me staying warm and my success in this was this sleeping bag, which I've got right here. It's a U.S. military extreme cold weather mummy bag, and I'll try to hold my flashlight and show this to you at the same time. As you can see, it's a mummy style, which means that when you zip it all the way up, this right here is the only thing that's left open. You can zip this whole thing up, and that is all that's left, and you can have your head so you can breathe sticking out of that, or your face sticking out of that, and that's the only area that is actually subjected to the cold. This sleeping bag is very thick. I think it's filled with goose down, and it worked out really well. It keeps you really warm. Starting with the clothing that I was wearing, I'll start from the feet and work up. I had 2 pairs of wool socks on, and then on the legs I had my polypropylene, which is just military surplus polypropylene. Keeps you warm. It's supposed to wick the sweat away. It's a synthetic material. I'd actually like to try some wool under like long johns and top sometime and see if wool does better, but these did awfully well this time. And then on top of that I have what's called a bear suit, which is just these really heavy fleece liners for the U.S. military. I think it's probably vintage from the 80s. They call it a bear suit because the inside looks kind of like bear fur, but it's very thick and keeps you pretty warm. And then for the top I had this wool sweater. Underneath the wool sweater I had a thin cotton turtleneck sweater, and then below that I had another polypropylene top. The purpose for the thin cotton turtleneck sweater was just for one reason. I only wanted that because I was wearing this balaclava. I think that's how it's pronounced. I'm actually not sure, but what this is, it goes on your head and covers your head. It's also very thick, and it just allows you to stick your face out of it, and you can breathe, and you can either pull it down like I've got it here so that this part, try to hold the flashlight, this part right here would be down below your chin, which is how I wore it. If you're very cold, you can actually pull this up over your nose, so the only thing showing is your eyes. But I wanted to be able to breathe easier, so I tried it this way first, and it turned out that's all I needed. I didn't get cold with that. But you'll notice that it kind of hangs down there, and that portion that hangs down the front and back goes down on top of your torso. And then I put this on first, and then I put that turtleneck sweater on, and the turtleneck came up and made a nice tight seal around the top of it. I've read a lot of times that a lot of the heat that you lose is out the top of your body, out of your head and your neck area. So I wore this, and I stayed very warm around my ears, my neck, my head, all stayed warm. So I was able to sleep all night long and never got cold, really. Woke up the next morning and it was 2 degrees, and that's whenever I realized just the real problem is getting up in the morning, because then you got to put on your boots, your exterior shell, like your pants and your coat, and that's all cold. And it's important that you don't sleep like with your boots on or with your exterior shell on, because they're usually going to be cold, wet, or have snow packed on them. And what I did was I stacked them all along the edge to try to keep that wind out along the bottom where that tent didn't seal up. So, first night, completely successful, stayed warm. The second night, my brother called me and asked me if I was going to do it again, and he brought his niece and nephew out with me, and we all stayed in the tent. We all had the same sleeping bags and similar gear. The niece and nephew are 5 and 8 years old, and again, we're only 50 or 100 yards from the house, so if they get cold, we can go right in. And they stayed warm and comfortable all night long as well. The one difference, my brother, he got a little bit chilly, but you see this, this pad that I've got, it's like a thick foam padding that I lay down underneath my sleeping bag. And I bought it mostly just to kind of help brace the shock of laying on the ground, but it turns out it's actually a nice insulator too, because my brother did not have one of those, and he got cold where his body was pressing hard against the ground. He could feel the cold from the snow underneath the tent coming up through. So he had to end up putting a couple of coats underneath of him to help insulate him from the ground. This turns out is a very, very nice thing to have. It helps insulate you from the ground, because I never had that problem. I never got cold at any time, so it worked out really well. So everything I've got here I think works out really well. The second night it actually got down to -5 with the wind wasn't blowing. The first night it got down to -2, and the wind was blowing at least 30-40 miles an hour, so the wind chill is probably like -18, -20, something like that. Both times we stayed warm and comfortable, so it's good to have the correct equipment is what I'm finding out. I still do want to get a nicer cold weather tent, but for now I'm going to keep this one and just keep my eye out for a nice cheaper one, but I realize now that I don't have to have that. For my conditions, I'm not going to be climbing the north face of the Eiger or anything like that, so for the conditions I'm going to be in, this is going to work out pretty good. So if you can find this sort of equipment, it's all military surplus, most of it that I'm buying, the extreme weather sleeping bag, the balaclava, the bear suit, the polypropylenes, wool socks you can pick up a lot of different places. Cabela's has them on sale, Costco has them, and then I've got the boots that I'm going to be doing a second review on. Those are the boots I've already done my first review on, and just kind of a sneak peek. They're working out really well. They're keeping my feet really warm. So I hope this has been somewhat encouraging or useful to some of you if you plan on wondering if you can, how cold you can survive, because I wasn't sure. I've never done this before, but now I know if I want to go on a hunting excursion, I've got the equipment that I can stay warm. So I plan to do that more often now, and not have to have fear that I'm not going to be able to survive it, or I'm going to end up getting in a dangerous situation. So until next time, stay safe. Thanks for watching.